Like Teresa said, my name is Jacqueline Miller. I've been interning with the Utah Department of Health and Human Services in the Tobacco Prevention and Control Program. And my main project that I worked on was with the Youth Electronic Cigarette, Marijuana, and Other Drugs Prevention Program. And it has the acronym YEMOP. So I'll be referring to YEMOP. That's what I'm referring to. And what I did was the school policy project. So just a little more details about YEMOP, just so everyone's aware of what we kind of do and why we did this project. So YEMOP, this is the structure, and it's a committee. And so we have the drug-free school side and the retail side. So this project was with the drug-free schools work group, part of the YEMOP committee. And the main focus areas of the drug-free schools work group is with supporting schools in prevention and intervention, increasing parental and community involvement, and working with law enforcement. So the project that I am presenting about is, it comes from the Drug-Free Schools work group. And the people in the work group, we have public health professionals, school board members, school counselors, school resource officers, juvenile justice services, community members, and a lot of different people that are in this work group. So we had a lot of different interests going into this project to learn more about what substance use policies in schools look like. So what happens when a student is caught with substances on campus? And prevention in schools is an important setting to prevent substance use now and in the future life of a student. So the policy can tell us a lot about the procedures going on in schools, and really how students are being disciplined and supported in school. So to gain a greater understanding, we looked at these 13 variables in all the public school district policies. And the way that we went about collecting data was through just utilizing the public school district policy websites. So we looked on their website to see what their policy was that they had posted. So there are some limitations with that, just that, it would have to be the most updated policy on their website. So maybe a school district might not have posted their most updated policy yet. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go through this. And this is just like a little disclaimer. We're not really here to like point fingers or to, call anyone out, but we really wanted to create a baseline of information in these areas to see where we can improve and to track that improvement over time. So we looked at discipline, the resource officer role, confiscation procedures, parent notification procedures, prevention and treatment resource offered, and peer and juvenile court requirements, how easy the policy is to access, when it was published, and if it included electronic cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco or nicotine, marijuana, and other drugs. So all of these variables are analyzed in context to just the Utah public school districts at this review that we did. So there are 41 public school districts in Utah. So let's go on to our first variable. The first one that we're looking at is discipline details. So when we first started, we were really looking at suspension and expulsion as a whole. And we really found that most policies do include aspects of suspension or expulsion. And so we really broke this down into what specific parts of the policy and like when suspension will occur with a substance use violation. So this really gave us more details on how discipline was being used. So looking at this pie chart, we can see the various violations and conditions that would lead to disciplinary consequences of suspension. In yellow, the first violation, we had 33.8% of policies that would just suspend right off the bat. And then the second violation and third violation were a little bit less. And then the specific language used in the green was may suspend or expel. And so that was really up to the school. And that was 27% of policies used that language. And then in purple, will suspend or expel, that was 23% of policies. And then we saw 10% that didn't include any suspension or expulsion for a violation. So one of the main reasons that this is really important to the work group is that there is evidence that using different practices instead of suspension or expulsion is can create better outcomes in schools. So we looked a little bit more into restorative justice practices.
On the road or something.
So restorative justice seeks to involve all impacted by harmful doing to repair harm and put things as right as possible.
Okay.
So instead of using suspension or expulsion, restorative justice was the recommended alternative. And just to provide a little bit more background on this, Utah Code on Discipline and Safety defines restorative justice as a program that will enhance school safety, and it reduces school suspensions. It limits referrals to law enforcement agencies and courts. And ultimately, it helps minors to take responsibility for and repair any harmful behavior that occurs in schools. So not only are restorative justice practices recommended as evidence-based prevention, it's also a part of Utah Code. Looking a little bit more at the Utah State Board of Education, they also encourage the use of restorative justice. They say that using punitive discipline measures and other harsh consequences, they're often applied disproportionately to minority students, and they really undermine the goal for success for all students. So we really want to keep kids in school, and we want to involve families and the community to help students achieve academic success. So we want to use restorative justice because it teaches rather than punishes the students to help them succeed and thrive in school. So in one study conducted, they stated that using restorative justice could reduce school suspensions and expulsions, improve academic achievement and attendance, reduce school violence and perceived misbehavior, and contribute to a positive institutional environment through supporting peer and youth relationships, facilitating that youth and adult social emotional development, engaging parents and improving teacher morale. And it really creates an environment that will help students to learn in the best environment possible. So we really wanted to see restorative justice practices in policy because it allows students to develop these important skills that help them not only while they're in school, but after school as well. So now you're probably wondering, what are some examples of restorative justice? What does this look like in a policy? So to provide some examples, Restorative justice could be an after-school intervention. It could be student and parent conferences. It could be creating a back-to-class plan with the student and the parent. It could be social, emotional behavior, or anger management programs. Community service. Behavioral support centers. Counseling. Positive behavior support. So these are some examples of what restorative justice could be. And bringing it back to the policy review, we really want to see more of this, these ideas incorporated into policies to help students change their behavior in a productive way. Okay, so the next variable that we looked at was the school resource officer role. And there are school resource officers who participate in the work group. And so there was a lot of interest in knowing more about how the school resource officer role was being utilized if a violation were to occur on campus. So school substance use policies could explain more to the extent to which the school resource officer participated in a violation. We only saw about 22% of policies that really mentioned how the resource officer was being involved in the policy. We also looked at parent notification procedure, and this was important because the Utah law requires that parents are notified when there is a substance use violation. So we saw 76% of policies that did provide this notification procedure when a student had a violation. And then we saw 47% of policies that included the confiscation procedure. And again, this is another aspect of Utah law to have the confiscation procedure in the policy, especially for the possession or use of electronic cigarette products. So this is really important to make sure that they're being collected and disposed of properly in that procedure. So this is a little bit lower, obviously, especially for it being part of Utah law. And then, as we talked about earlier, we access these policies online. And so we really wanted to know how user-friendly these websites are, how easy it is for a parent or a student to get on the school website and really find the policy and be able to read it and understand it. And so we found that about 57% of policies were easy to access online. So they were located in a clear place. And you know, there's a lot of different websites and formats out there. And so again, we really want to involve the parents here to have success for the students. So knowing where the policy is and where to find it will be really helpful. Okay, and then when looking into prevention and treatment resources, there were 78% of policies that offered or did require a student to participate in one of these prevention or treatment resource programs. And a lot of them help the students to make behavior changes. And this is another great example of restorative justice practices to include these type of resources for students. So we saw 78% of these, and some examples in our policies, they included early intervention, drugs and alcohol classes, tobacco cessation class, counseling services, the Clearing the Vapor program, Utah Tobacco Quit Line, and Utah Quit Net. Next, we looked into your peer or juvenile court requirements. And again, we had some members of Juvenile Justice Services who were really interested in how the policies were utilizing their services. And we saw 61% of Utah Public School District policies that included details about peer or juvenile court requirements in the policy. So each public school district who utilizes peer or juvenile court kind of defined the parameters a little bit differently for the requirement of a referral in their policy. So just to provide an example of that, the common language used with this service is before the student is readmitted to school, an assessment of results will be presented to the parents and will be forwarded to juvenile court if permitted under Utah code. So that's an example of how juvenile justice services are utilized. So recent legislation in 2020, they updated the law around a substance use violation policies in Utah to specifically address electronic cigarettes and some of the other topics that we've discussed today. So while doing the policy evaluations that we did, it was important to us as a work group to see that there had been updates and changes made to reflect these most recent changes to Utah law. So we saw only 55% of policies that were published in 2020 or newer. And along with this, again, I just want to point out that maybe some districts might not have published their most recent policy on their website. So that's definitely something to consider. But looking into this further, we are hoping to contact schools and really gather some more data about this in our next steps. This was especially interesting to me. During the evaluation, we collected data on which specific substances were addressed in each policy. So we can see, starting on your left, that we have electronic cigarettes were included in 71%, alcohol at 76% of policies, tobacco and nicotine was in 80% of policies, marijuana was in 45%, and other drugs or substances was 76%. So we can see this, this difference here, this gap in marijuana. There's significantly less policies that specifically include marijuana in their policy. So being part of UMOP, that's an area of concern for us as we really are focusing on preventing youth marijuana use. And so that was especially interesting to me to see that. Just some conclusions from this review that we did. This was really a good baseline. Nothing like this has been collected previously, so we didn't have something to really compare to. But we do have some action items to move forward. And these are some specific areas that we identified for that action. So to reiterate, we really were interested in the suspension and expulsion and how to incorporate restorative justice practices instead of jumping to that punitive discipline. And then we also were really interested in policies that were published in 2020 or newer, and hoping to help all districts really get to that baseline level of 2020 or newer for their policies to incorporate the most recent changes to Utah law. And then lastly, the confiscation procedure, the role of a school resource officer, and the inclusion of marijuana were included in fewer than half of all Utah public school district policies. So those are some other areas that, you know, have some potential for improvement as well. So our next steps, we have looked into as a work group, utilizing all the resources, all the different people in our work group, to create a toolkit for best practices to distribute to the school districts, because we know that having that local influence is really where we'll see the most change. So we want to provide resources to the local level for them to help the schools. And so that is going to be in process. It will take some time to work on that. And then we also want to provide a training to the local education agencies to educate them on restorative justice practices, to support them in their efforts to improve policy and help students to achieve the best results. So another thing that we're looking at, and we'll also take some time with the Tobacco Prevention and Control Program, is creating a model comprehensive policy that includes not only tobacco, but all other substances as well. And then going forward, just future policy reviews. We have this baseline data, but we want to see where things go and how things will change over time. So these are the references that I used. And then my contact information and my supervisor's contact information there. So that's what I have, and I'll stop sharing. If there are any questions or anything that I can answer?
Tell me more about why you're interested in having marijuana specifically split out as a category in the policy.
Yeah, I think that was interesting because you're listing all the other substances, but it almost felt like marijuana was excluded from that. So that was interesting to me.
So I guess, for example, in our policy, like all prohibited substances, all controlled substances kind of get lumped into one category. And then alcohol is another category because it doesn't quite fit in that same thing. And then nicotine's another category because it doesn't quite fit in the thing. So heroin, cocaine, all those things, none of those things get listed out. That's all just together. So I'm curious is the impression that marijuana is forgotten about, or is there a specific focus on marijuana where you want that specifically, where you think is important for this specifically mentioned by itself as its own category?
I think marijuana's become one of our priority substances, though, with the data that we look at. So I'm wondering, Jacqueline, is that maybe why?
It's absolutely our priority substance. It's the number one substance being used out there with our students.
Yeah, and the waters are really muddy right now with that being legalized for medical. And so I think maybe that's why, I'm guessing. So I don't mean to put any words in Jacqueline's mouth or Mercedes' mouth, but you guys correct me if I'm assuming that incorrectly.
Yeah, I know. And I think Jacqueline mentioned, the committee, it's looking at those substances or other substances. So I guess we've seen an increase of kids getting into marijuana and having all this, things happening that we hear from the local enforcement and things like that. So we wanted to have it. I think it would be good to have it stand alone because it's major. It's huge compared to other ones that you mentioned that are lumped together. So I think it's like a new trend. It's like e-cigarettes now. It's kind of on its own. So yes, we'll put up. Jacqueline also put together a document that goes over like the objectives of this project that she did and the the variables that were listed, conclusions, we can share that in here too. So for anybody, we want this to be used and utilized. We have the data. Again, there were 41 public schools that were reviewed. We're hoping that we would do the same with charter schools, just to figure out what's happening at that level. Again, we're not excluding anybody. It's just that Jacqueline is just here for a couple months and that she is actually finishing up her internship with us at the early next month. So we would have to go through the committee and see if we can allocate another intern to help us with the charter schools. But that's something also that the committee is interested in looking at with charter schools and see how we can what are we going to see there. We're thinking we might see the same things, but who knows. So that's where we are. And yeah, if there's any questions, I'm the coordinator for the committee. We're always looking for members too. Anybody can join that has an interest in the substances and the prevention of the substances. And again, like Jacqueline mentioned, there is a subcommittee. We meet monthly. So if anybody is interested in joining any of those conversations, we would love to have you be part of the main group or the subgroup, as I know you guys are busy with other great things that are happening in the community. But are there any questions?
Mercedes, will you put your contact info in the chat just so that in case people want to reach out to you, they have that?
Okay.
It went by pretty quickly on the slides.
Okay.
So that would be great. Thank you. And I, my wheels are just turning. That was such great information, Jacqueline. I'm thinking that, you know, it would be prudent for all of us to go through our own school districts and look at the policies and review them and identify gaps and, you know, make some kind of a contact with our school board members and say, these are our concerns. So anyway, I hope that Mr. Edmonds, I'm not sure your first name, I can't see it right there. So
It's Paul.
oh, Paul, did that help clarify that a little bit?
I have to think about it a little bit. I'm not sure
Okay.
I'm on the same page with the reasoning for splitting that out. I realize 100%, but then by that logic, I need an opioid section too. And so I'm not sure. I would recommend going to the school board. Probably isn't your first step. You probably want to touch bases with the administration. Not that you can't go, there's nothing wrong. They won't have the same knowledge and understanding of these policies as the actual the people who are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. So usually in your student services, most of the school departments will be labeled that way. We're not, but most of them are. And then asking about whoever's in charge of the drug and alcohol policies. That's your best first step to really be able to affect change. And then people there make the changes and then run it through the board for approval is usually the process. But going straight to the board, you can do it. It's just not going to be very effective, I don't think.
That's great input. Thank you. That's excellent. So, and this might be a little naive on my part. And so maybe this question, maybe nobody else has this question, but those policies are different per school. Is that what you guys are saying? Or would that be district wide? Those policies are the same?
We looked at them at a district-wide level, so I think they typically are at the district level, the same policy for each school.
Okay, that was what I was assuming, but just wanted to clarify. Awesome. Okay, anyone have any other comments or questions for Jacqueline, Mercedes? No? Okay, thank you for being here. This was an excellent bonus webinar and we appreciate all that you're doing, all the work in the field, and then being willing to come back and share that with all of us. So I appreciate that. Just a quick reminder, we have a webinar next week, so you guys hop on and hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.